Hello again, everyone. As promised, I'm back with a 350 subscriber Q&A special of sorts with responses to your burning questions. Note how I say that with complete sarcasm, but this is all, as with the first video, it's all pretty much going to be unscripted as before, aside from the actual readings of the questions, but without further ado, let's begin, shall we? Wing T. Spears asks, what genre of pasta makes you the most uneasy? The genre of pasta that makes me the most uneasy is probably the ones that play on things that we were kind of already afraid of. I feel like that response kind of deserves a bit of an explanation. For me, one story in particular that actually kind of had me rather unnerved was a creepypasta called Rap Rat. It wasn't so much that it was a well-written pasta. It was the fact that it played on those kinds of things that just came out of the 90s, like that 90s weird kind of stuff. It was a tale about, basically it was about one of those videotape board game combination strange things that came out of the 90s called Rap Rat. And without spoiling too much, it came down to, if I remember correctly, it was whoever watched the tape basically saw their fears kind of put in front of them. And it came down to Rap Rat was basically this doll that was sort of possessed in a way by this spirit called Apparat. It was basically a fear demon. But the thing that freaked me out the most about that story was the fact that it was a puppet. Not so much a puppet, but it was one of those Muppet-esque style puppets. It didn't help the situation that Rap Rat was an actual thing that existed back in the day. I've never actually seen any physical copies of it, not that I really want to at this point. But, God, I'm rambling. The point that I'm trying to make here is that the stories that unnerve me the most are the ones that play on our pre-existing fears, and not so much that they play on our pre-existing fears. Fear is alright, it's dread. Like the anticipation of fear. That's probably much worse. Like, I guess in a sense it comes down to stories that incorporate that element of dread, but bring in real-world elements that make you question its plausibility. I'm sure that's probably confusing as hell, but I hope that answers your question, Spears. Epic Shadow 26 asked, how old are you? I am 22 years old. Any personality traits you could share? Let's see, personality traits. In case any of you haven't figured this out yet, I'm kind of an introvert. I'm normally very reserved. When I first came into the creepypasta community, it took a little while for me to get out of my shell and start actually talking to people, but I don't know, in terms of personality traits, I'm very pragmatic. I'm usually really quiet unless you start getting to know me, then I just don't shut up. But God, I don't know, I've never really ever been asked to describe myself before. I don't know, it feels strange to have to give your own personality traits, because more often than not, there are things that you see that other people don't, and then likewise, there are things that other people see that you, I don't want to necessarily say can't see, but it's easier for other people to see. Like, I can recall one instance where I was in a Skype call, and I think I was in it with 4 or 5 people, and I had somebody complimenting me on my narration work I do on the channel here, and I can't remember my exact response, but it was basically met with, from, I think, more than one person, and I'm actually quoting what he said here, Paradox is the humblest motherfucker I have ever met, which, you know, isn't something I'd necessarily say about myself, because, like I said, it would just seem like ego stroking at that point, I guess you could say. But, I don't know, I guess what it comes down to is I've never really been comfortable listing traits and things about myself because it just seems egotistical. I guess. I'm not entirely sure if that answers your question or not, but hopefully it did. I have a feeling you can gather more from how I'm answering the question than what I'm actually saying in my answer. Marmonery actually asked a few questions. What got you into creepypasta? Let's see, I actually got into creepypasta about 2 or 3 years ago when I started listening to YouTube really heavily. I used to work long shifts at a rather boring job, so I had a lot of free time to actually kind of work by myself, I guess you could say. And I actually ended up buying a Bluetooth headset after a while because I was getting sick of dealing with headphone wires, but that's a whole different issue. I think I discovered creepypastas and started getting into them. God, I don't even actually completely remember now. I can recall some of the earliest people I actually listened to that started getting me into them, which was a YouTuber by the name of Some Ordinary Gamers, Mr. Creepypasta, obviously. But I actually got into it through little more or less unconventional means, I guess you could say, because that was only half of the equation. I listened to a number of other narrators on YouTube that didn't necessarily do creepypastas, but rather they just did narrations of a different sort. But more often than not, they were either incredibly dark or incredibly sad. And the way they did narrations, the way that I can describe it is probably closest akin to Mr. Creepypasta with how he puts in pretty heavy production value into his work. Basically, they were pretty beefed up. They were basically radio dramas, but without giving too much away as to what the stories entailed. To make a long story short, listening to creepypastas and narrations in general, they kind of kept me pretty sane through those long, arduous shifts that I had to go through. Not that the job itself was hard, it was just very tedious, and listening to creepypastas and narrations and things like that kept my brain working. And after a while, this actually kind of leads into the next question he asked here. What made you want to narrate creepypastas? To make a long story short, a friend of mine, who I would talk to quite frequently during my shifts at this job, she was also into creepypastas pretty heavily too. And I had brought it up one night and she asked me to read something to her over the phone. She basically sent me a creepypasta and just blindly said, hey, read this for me. I want to hear you read this, because she had always told me how she thought that I had a good voice. After I had read it to her, she was just kind of dumbstruck. So she said, hey, why don't you try doing creepypasta narrations? I mean, I think you'd be good for it. So I kind of contemplated it for a while, but one night when I had the house to myself, I whipped out my microphone, whipped out all my recording gear, because little side note, I dabble in engineering. I've been a musician for about 12 years now, but I'll probably talk about that later in the questions. But I whipped out all my recording gear and I just tried to basically just give it a shot. It was kind of one of those decisions where it was just, okay, don't think too hard about it, because if you think too hard about it, you'll back out of it and you won't ever do it. And it's just one of those things where I was like, okay, don't think, just act. So I basically just recorded a creepypasta from the way that I'd seen it done and the way I knew how to do it. Edited it together as amateurishly as I did back then, because I've been doing this for about a year now, and I'm sure some of you have seen the comments on the earlier videos that I have complaining about volume and things like that, but like I said, we were all noobs at some point, so we all learn. But I don't know. Another big part of how I got into wanting to narrate creepypastas was, I'm not going to name any names, mainly because I don't recall any, but I heard great narrators, and then I heard narrators that were just so flat and just drab, and not to sound cynical, but they weren't as enjoyable to listen to as some of the higher production value stuff. So me being the one who dabbles in engineering and all that stuff, I thought to myself, I can do something like this. I could make something great happen with this. Because there were narrators that just, and I can't really say much because I was in this position at one point or another, narrators that didn't have like high-end gear, they didn't have editing skills, they didn't have things like that. But then there were narrators that just created an atmosphere and just completely immersed you in a story for anywhere from 5 to 45 minutes. And to me, that was just something really special. I mean, like I said, it kind of kept me sane on those long shifts at work. But the thought just kind of came into my head that, you know, I could do this. There are people out there that want to hear high-end narrations that have high production value and decent quality voice acting. And, you know, just in general, they need something that will take them away and immerse them in some other place in some story, even if just for a little bit. And after a while, I really grew to enjoy it because I was having a lot of fun doing it because, I don't know, the first time I actually showed somebody the process that I go through to make a creepypasta, what I make it, they were just baffled at the way it just went from the page to the narration to adding the music and effects and just making everything sound the way that it does. It just completely blew their minds. Not saying that what I do is anything special, per se, but I feel like I'm just rambling now. Next question. Are you going to stick to creepypasta, or will you expand to other genres? I saw you did a folktale like one, and it was pretty interesting. Okay. Without giving too much away, I do actually run another narration-based channel. And without giving too much away about what is actually on it, because I feel like that would be suicide for my channel right now, but I affectionately refer to it as my my dirty little YouTube secret. And without giving too much away, it's got some of my music, it's got some dark stuff, and it also has some erotic stuff, but we're not going to get too far into that. How did you think of your name? The name that I go by, Paradox Noctis. When I came up with it, I basically had to think of something, something that just sounded kind of ominous and mysterious, I guess, but 2, I also had to find something that wasn't taken yet, because a lot of these creepypasta channels have, let's go through the buzzword list. They have reads, they have creepy, they have, narration, things like that in the title, and I didn't want anything like that. That and the name Paradox. I don't remember when I actually acquired that as a nickname, but it just kind of stuck when I got it. So I figured it had to include, you know, my nickname Paradox in it. But, yeah, hopefully that answers your questions there. C Johnny51 asks, what's your favorite anime? Oh, I knew this one was coming. For just some reason, I just had a feeling that this question was going to come up. I enjoy anime. I don't actually watch a lot of it, though. Let's see, just to name a few off the top of my head. I really enjoy Black Lagoon. Ghost in the Shell is pretty good. I love Attack on Titan. Attack on Titan's pretty badass, if a bit dark and depressing. But, you know, what do I know? I've not delved that far into the world of anime, so I'm sure there's probably worse stuff out there. But, I'd probably say one of my guilty pleasures in terms of anime would probably be the first few seasons of Yu-Gi-Oh! Before it started to suck. Because the first few seasons were just, I remember just sitting in front of the TV on Saturday mornings, watching Yu-Gi-Oh! And just being completely engrossed in it. I look back at it now that I've been sort of mainlining it, now that it's on Netflix, but I look back at it now and I realize just how cheesy and just how bad it was. But it's one of those things where it's nostalgic and it's part of my childhood, so I still enjoy it. But to answer your question, I don't really watch a terrible lot of anime, which I wish that I did. If there's any suggestions, you know, leave them in the comment box. But I'm always looking for something good to watch. Like I said, I never really delved that far into the world of anime, but not to say that I wouldn't get into it. I Heart Video Games 08 asks, what advice and programs do you suggest for narrators and people trying to get into YouTube in general? Okay, here's a tough question. Just for a point of reference, I actually use a lot of high-end gear, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you need high-end gear to get into it. As long as you have a microphone and you have Audacity, that's what I've seen 90% of the narrators on YouTube work with. I mean, me, like I said, I dabble in engineering, so I use an external DAW to add in sound effects and do voice effects and just do all the fancy schmancy stuff in general. I do it outside of Audacity. Audacity is actually free. You can find it through a quick Google search, but what I use is, just to give you a quick rundown on my process, I record the raw narration in Audacity. I clean up the pops and clicks and just the flub lines and everything like that. Then I export the file. I run it through a external plugin that I use to sort of clean things up a little bit more. Can't give away all the trade secrets now, can I? But I take the exported file and I import it into my studio. And that's where I add the music and I level everything out and I add all the sound effects and things like that. Yeah, advice to anybody just wanting to get into YouTube. There's a couple things I would suggest. One, you need to have time. Trust me, a 45-minute narration and editing it all together can take anywhere from 3 hours or more. And that's not counting, rendering times for the video and things like that. You do need time to invest in what you're doing, because if you don't invest any time in it, you'll never get better. You'll never learn the little ins and outs, little tricks, the shortcuts, the ways to make things easier. Trust me, when I first started doing this, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. But a year later, here I am at 400 subs because, I must be doing something right. Because when I look back at it, my first narrations were just god awful. I mean, the background noise, the volume, that everything was just so bad. But that's all part of the process. You don't learn unless you do it. You're never going to learn, you're never going to get anywhere with it unless you actually sit down and put the time into learning how to do it and doing it right. Another thing I would suggest is have a decent microphone. I know that I've seen, like I said, I've seen some narrators that they sound like they're using a headset microphone, and you can hear you can hear the lips and the mouth noises and the moving against the foam and all that stuff, and it just doesn't sound good. But I'd probably say have a decent microphone, because it can actually make a huge difference in your sound quality. But probably the biggest thing I could say for anybody wanting to get into YouTube in general, much less narrations, is you need to have a passion for what you do. You can't just get up in the morning and just dread having to go and sit down and record and just have that dread in the back of your mind to the point where you procrastinate on it. Trust me, I've had those days before where I'm just like, ugh, I don't want to do a narration today. I really don't. You can't look at it as work. At the end of the day, I genuinely enjoy what I do. I love making these narrations and interacting with you guys and just knowing that somebody is listening, I guess you could say. You need to have a passion for what you do, because it'll show through in your work if you don't. If you're just getting into YouTube to get the quick fame or, get paid by YouTube or whatever the case may be, you're in it for the wrong reason. I mean, trust me, when I started doing these narrations, I didn't think that I was really going to get anywhere with it. Like I said, I didn't think I was going to pass 10, 20 subscribers. But lo and behold, here I am staring at my sub count and it's at 400, and I can't believe it. I mean, I didn't think anybody was going to be paying attention to the stuff that I was doing, but I was having fun doing it. I kept doing it even though I didn't get up to this subscriber count until very recently. because I genuinely enjoy doing it. If you don't have a passion for what you do, it will definitely show through in your work. There's a difference between not having the passion for what you're doing and not knowing what you're doing. And what I mean by that is I've seen people that will just mass upload videos and they all sound like crap. And I've seen people that will slowly upload videos. They sound like crap at first, but they learn as they go and they get better and better and better as they go because they genuinely want to learn and they enjoy what they do. But if you don't have a passion for what you're doing, then what's the point? Logan Von Haden asked, what was high school like for you? In a word, my high school experience can be summed up with the sentence, people looked at me and thought I was going to be the next person to shoot up the school. And what I mean by that is I dressed very dark. I was always that people were just intimidated by me for some reason. A lot of people just never really talked to me, and I never really understood why. It probably didn't help the fact that I wore, chain pants, combat boots, trench coats. I wore all that stuff. I mean, you hear my voice, and you look at Mr. Creepypasta because I know he's done live action stuff, and you expect all these creepypasta narrators to just be these gothed out, dark people. I'm probably closer to that than most other narrators. I've always dressed dark. I've always not been one to go with conventional fashion sense, I guess you could say. I mean, I'm pierced. I have tattoos, things like that. But to be honest, I don't really remember a whole lot about high school outside of a few select things. I mean, people just generally left me alone. I mean, I know we hear a lot about like high school bullying or whatever, and you'd think that I, of all people, would probably be one of those people that got picked on just because of the way that I dressed and just the way people are. But that wasn't the case with me. Nobody ever really messed with me. And to this day, I still can't figure out why, because I was probably the stereotypical goth kid that got, beaten up in the locker rooms, but nobody ever really messed with me. Like I said, it all goes back to my original statement. I was the one that people looked at and said, yep, that's the next Columbine right there. Which is weird because whenever people would start talking to me, like legitimately actually start carrying on a conversation with me, they'd be like, oh, Paradox is like the nicest dude I've ever freaking met. Which still makes me laugh. But, yeah, high school was fun. Creepy Puppy Pasta asked a few questions. What kind of music do you like to listen to? If the goth statement earlier wasn't any indication, I listen to a lot of heavy music. But as I said, I've been a musician for 12 years now, so I've played everything from flamenco to, heavy agrotech electronic music. So I pretty much got taste in basically everything. I mean, with a few exceptions, I really, really cannot stand pop music because it's not talent at that point, it's all marketing. There's very few people in the pop world that actually deserve to be where they're at. But I digress. I'm going to go into a angry tirade there, but the music that I enjoy listening to the most lately is probably the heavy electronic stuff, mainly because I also make it, but yeah, just any kind of music that just invokes strong emotions. Just that kind of music that just gives you those feelings that you won't get any other way. I know that sounds really vague, but I've always been a believer that music expresses the things that we can't with words alone. What are your favorite pastas to read? I enjoy reading pastas that allow me to flex my voice acting muscles. Like, for instance, I really enjoyed reading the story Smile for Me because I got to laugh like a maniac, and anybody I show it to never believes that it's me at first, but that only serves to freak them out further. But I also enjoy reading stories that just have a good gripping plot. Like, this kind of goes back to my previous point, but I really enjoyed doing The Origin of Laughing Jack because I got to do so many voices, but I also got to add a lot of effects and just make it this really engrossing sort of thing. I also enjoy reading stories that allow me to flex my engineering muscles, I guess you could say. Stories that are usually pretty effect heavy. Things where I get to alter my voice or add in a lot of sound effects or just make it something that it wouldn't be if I had just read it dry. Like, for example, the story that I uploaded recently called Pain. It was actually written by a very close friend of mine. I don't know if he wants to be named or not, but when he sent it to me, reading it on paper is one thing, but actually narrating it and having to get in that mindset of somebody who is laying on the floor, bleeding out, with the sounds of just blood hitting the wood floor as the music just comes to a stop, like everything is just ending and you're in those last seconds of your life. It was just something fantastic to read. He specifically came to me when he wrote it because he said he wanted me to narrate it because he knew that I could do something with it. Because like I said, reading it dry is one thing, but actually having it adapted into audio just gives it a whole new life. It gives it just that something extra you don't get from reading it dry. I mean, he called me up afterwards after I had uploaded it, and he was practically in tears because he didn't anticipate that I was going to be able to do something with it to deliver that kind of effect. But this is exactly what I'm talking about. I genuinely enjoy what I do, and I enjoy the opportunity to try new things and explore techniques of editing and voice acting and just things that I wouldn't get otherwise. And last from Puppy, what is the weirdest message you've ever gotten? I don't actually get messages on YouTube, so I don't think I have an answer for that one. Sorry, Puppy. Blue Anima actually asked a slew of questions, so let's cover the ones that I haven't already answered. Do you like to read books in the horror genre? If you do you have any recommendations? Books in the horror genre. I actually love H.P. Lovecraft. I love Edgar Allan Poe. Stephen King's done some pretty good stuff. I know it's not really a horror, but the first book of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, Inferno, that's some pretty terrifying shit. But in terms of recommendations for books in the horror genre, I can't think of any off the top of my head. Anything by Edgar Allan Poe is normally pretty damn depressing. H.P. Lovecraft actually writes a lot of slow descent into madness style stuff, so if that's your interest, that's your guy to go to. But then again, he's also the guy where the whole Cthulhu mythos comes from, so there's also that. What do you think about Stephen King, Joe Hill, and Dean Koontz? Out of all those authors, Stephen King is the only one I ever actually had any real interest in. Dean Koontz and Joe Hill, I've not really read anything by them, so I can't actually provide a decent answer for that. But, I mean, Stephen King is pretty well known in the horror realm for a reason. I mean, he wrote It, The Tommyknockers, Salem's Lot, things like that. I mean, I know there's a running joke about how he spits out books like no tomorrow, but I don't know, I guess you could say his older stuff is probably the stuff to look for. I'm actually going to group these three questions here into one because they all kind of tie into one another. Have you played any of the games or made any of the rituals like Three Kings, the Midnight Man, and so on? Do you believe in the supernatural? And do you have any religion? I was kind of anticipating that this question was going to come, but hopefully I can answer it tactfully. No, I haven't actually done any of the games or rituals in the creepypasta world. In fact, I basically tell anybody who's interested in doing them to not do them, and if they're not going to listen, to exercise caution, because I do believe in the supernatural. I believe that there's stuff that we can't explain in this world. But leading into that last question, I am religious. I was raised a Christian, hasn't changed, but it's one of those things that I just don't really talk about online unless it comes up, because I believe there's a time and place for everything. Doesn't change my fate, doesn't change anybody else's, but the internet isn't exactly a place that's kind to anything regarding religion, politics, anything like that. But I'm sure you see why the answer to those first two questions is a little more clear now. But like I said, I don't endorse anybody doing any of their rituals because I believe that if you open the door for that stuff, you welcome it in. I've had plenty of experiences with things like that, and it's not something that I take lightly. What's your favorite ice cream flavor? The kind that's in a bowl in front of me, normally. I don't know, I'm not very picky about things like that usually. What's your favorite time of year? Summer, autumn, spring, or winter? That's a tough question for me to answer because I think that every time of the year has its benefits. I mean, spring, it's that nice cool time of year when it's not too hot, it's not too cold, it's nice and rainy. Summer's that time of year when everyone starts swimming again and the sun stays out till 9 at night, and it's fantastic. You have daylight and you can actually stay out and do things. Autumn, I don't need to say much about autumn. I mean, autumn is just beautiful. The leaves start changing colors, the winds start blowing, it starts cooling down. Then we get into winter where, it'd be nice if I lived somewhere where it actually freaking snowed, but that's a whole different issue. But, winter. Fire's in the fireplace. That's all that needs to be said. If you had to choose, would you live in a flat in the city or a house in the country? That is a question I'm quite torn on, because I would love to just live in the countryside, live off the land, have a plot of land that I could just, survive off of, I guess you could say. But then again, I also enjoy the aspects of living in a city. I don't know, it's kind of a split kind of answer for me. But I hope that answered all your questions there. Milton Santana actually only asked one question in his post, but I feel it necessary to read the whole thing, if he doesn't mind. He says, "Thanks for your amazing work. I've been dealing with depression and your videos make me feel better about life. Whenever I'm feeling sad, I just listen to one of your narrations and it makes me feel great. I hope you keep making more amazing narrations and never give up on your dreams. Thanks so much and congrats on your 350 subs. I want to know, what are some of your favorite authors or books?" And that, right there, is the reason that I continue to do what I do. The fact that I know somebody is listening and getting something out of it and genuinely enjoying the work that I put out. At this point, if I didn't have all of you listening and leaving feedback and things like what Milton wrote to me, I don't think I'd still be doing this. It's things like that that give me the drive to keep going on the days that I just don't want to get up and do a narration and go through the whole editing process and everything. I look at things like that and I just know that I'm doing something beneficial to someone, even if it is just narrating a scary story on YouTube. It's stuff like that is the reason I continue to do what I do. I mean, I got so choked up reading that the first time. I just couldn't believe that someone somewhere out there was being this affected by what I do and was enjoying it that much, and that it was actually helping someone. I mean, it still blows my mind to think about. But to get into a lighter note here, in regards to his question, some of my favorite authors, or books, I should say at this point, like I said, were H.P. Lovecraft. I love that man's work. Edgar Allan Poe, Stephen King, typical horror authors, but a lot of the things that are actually sitting on my bookshelf actually aren't books, like reading books per se. They're like, just to name a few things that are up here, I got a military field guide up on my shelf here, zombie survival guide, things like that, just more information books, I guess you could say. But I'd have to say my favorite series of books outside of horror was a series called Redwall by Brian Jakes. Looking back on it, I know it seems kind of like a childish series, but I grew up reading them, so I just absolutely love them. But there you go, not everything has to be horror all the time. Paul Leeper asked, your narrations make you sound like the manliest man to ever man. Are you? Oh, man. I'm not entirely sure how to answer that one. Let's just leave that for what it is. Either way, that's not up for me to decide, so let's leave that one be. Creepy Caledonian asked, what made you start narrating creepypastas? And do you have any tips for new narrators? Well, I've already answered the first part of that, but in terms of tips for new narrators specifically, 1. Enunciate. I cannot count the number of times I've heard narrators that slur their words and you have a hard time understanding them. Enunciate, people. 2. You need to have some confidence. Trust me, it's something that we all go through when we start narrating. The hardest part of hearing your own voice is getting used to it. I absolutely could not stand the sound of my own voice when I started narrating. I would dread editing just because just that awkward stigma of having to hear yourself. But if you can get past it, things will get easier. And 3, off the top of my head, this is probably the biggest piece of advice I can give you, is play to your strengths. I've heard narrators as young as 13, 14 years old that clearly have not hit puberty yet, but they still narrate well because they play to the style of narration that their voice fits. Me, I've got a naturally deep voice, so I try and play to stories that allow me to use my natural voice to work with the story. I guess you could say, I know that sounds confusing, but it really just depends. I mean, when I say play to your strengths, I don't mean get comfortable and rest on your laurels. You need to be constantly learning and experimenting and trying to learn how to voice act, because surprisingly, it's a big part of what I and a lot of other narrators do. Because if I just read all my voices like this, the stories would be completely boring. But when I can, I try and change my voice up and try and act out the different voices to the best of my ability. But above all, like I said before, you need passion for what you do. Yeah, your early works are probably going to be crap. I mean, I can say that comfortably because that's exactly what I went through. For a long period of time, my narrations actually sucked really hard. But that's part of the learning process. When you make mistakes, it's an opportunity to learn from them, not to be taken as discouragement. Blame It on George asked, what's your favorite creepypasta, or what creepypastas do you think are underrated? Ugh. My favorite creepypasta, that's like asking to pick a favorite child, because many of the creepypastas that I have experience with are actually ones that I've narrated. I don't know, I've got a soft spot in my heart for The Origin of Laughing Jack, just because that was my first really long, really heavy narration that I did, and it didn't help that I was doing it during my whole 31 Days of Madness thing during October, where I was basically putting out a narration every day for 31 days. I just about killed myself doing that, but that's beside the point. The Origin of Laughing Jack is just one of those stories that kind of let me see what I was made of, I guess you could say. I don't know, there are a couple of stories that I'm rather fond of, like I said, The Origin of Laughing Jack, Smile for Me. My favorite part, those are good creepypastas. I haven't done it yet, hint hint, but stories like No End House in 1999, and just the generally long, really story-heavy creepypastas that are really well written, those are pretty good ones. But, let's see what else. I'm trying to think of a few more off the top of my head. Zorax is a pretty good creepypasta. Been Drowned, obviously, just because it's so infamous, but I don't know. It's a tough question to answer because creepypastas, they cover such a broad spectrum that it's really difficult to pin down what exactly makes a good creepypasta to an individual, no less. Because we had a lot of people that thought that, Sonic.exe and Jeff the Killer were good creepypastas when in reality, let's move on. Bambilu96 asks, what was the inspiration behind your name? As I said before, the whole thing with the Paradox, the name just kind of stuck with me a long time ago, and it was always just kind of the thing that people referred to me as, even as I was playing in bands, as I played video games online, things like that. I mean, that was just always kind of the name that I went by. But when I started doing creepypastas, like I said, I wanted a name that was different, but something that just kind of meant something to me. Because when I first started doing creepypastas and I started just putting myself out online in general, this is going to sound kind of shallow to say, but it was kind of a chance to reinvent myself, I guess you could say. I wasn't really content with who I was in real life. I mean, I was sitting in my room, playing guitar all the time, making music, and just not getting anywhere with my life. Not that I am at this point either, but when I got online and decided to put myself out there, was a chance to reinvent myself and put myself out there as I would want people to see me. I mean, Paradox Noctis literally translates loosely, I should say, into Nocturnal Enigma. But, I don't know, it just kind of fit with my night owl personality, but also the fact that even people that I've been talking to for the year that I've been on here still don't know, like, even for knowing me for a year, there's a lot of people that really don't know much about me. Like I said, I'm pretty reserved, and I tend to keep a lot of things pretty close to the vest in terms of information about myself. D.H. Carlax asked, what is your name? How old are you? What's your favorite kind of music? Well, considering how I answered the last two, I will answer the first one. And as much as it pains me to say, my real name is not something I'm going to be given. So, sorry. Morals and Virtues was actually one of those people that asked a slew of other questions, so let's answer these as rapid fire as possible, because this is dragging on quite long. 1. Are you going to put music on your channel someday? Well, to be blunt, I actually have some of my music up on my other channel right now. Not all of it, but, I don't know. It's sort of a double-edged sword for me, because I'm comfortable putting it on that channel because I don't have nearly as many subs as I have on this channel here. But I've always been kind of wary about putting up my music anywhere because people download illegally and steal music and things like that. And I've just always been kind of wary about it. Painfully wary about it because, musician again. But, I don't know. I guess what it comes down to is I'm comfortable with music being up on that other channel because I know not many people are going to see it. Despite me being out on YouTube and putting myself out there on a pretty much daily basis. I don't know. My music is just something that I don't know if I have as much confidence in, I guess. I know that sounds kind of contradictory, but if there's enough interest in it, I'll pop up a link to my my Bandcamp. I might put up a few tracks on my channel just for shits and giggles, But we'll see. Like I said, if there's enough interest in it. 2. What is your favorite Pokemon? Pikachu. No reason, just Pikachu. 3. Got a favorite Broadway musical? No, I do not. I'm not actually all that into Broadway. 4. What is your most embarrassing story? I can think of a few embarrassing stories, actually, that don't actually pertain to this channel in particular, but I can think of one that's far less embarrassing than the others, but that's not the point. The only one that I could think of off the top of my head was when I was doing the maniacal laughter for Smile For Me, and my landlord came knocking on my front door, asking if I was murdering somebody in here. Needless to say, he stepped inside to make sure that I was telling the truth, but, I guess that's a sign that I'm doing something right. 5. What are your personal highlights from being in the community? Just the opportunity to work with so many cool people and just meeting just all these fantastic people that I never would have met otherwise. It's been such a great experience. I mean, I didn't really have any friends, I guess you could say, coming into the community, and now there are people that I talk to on basically a daily basis, people that I work with, people that actually care if they don't hear from me for a couple of days, and it makes me happy to know that I've got to know so many cool people just from deciding that I wanted to narrate scary stories on YouTube. 6. Do you think you're an introvert or an extrovert? Introvert. Easy. Easy answer. Introvert. And 7. This one's kind of long, so bear with me. So here's the scenario. We are at a creepypasta narrators convention, and everyone has to cosplay as a narrator aside from themselves. After a time of meeting a bunch of other people, you and I meet. Soon after, we are put up to get food for everyone. So the questions are, A. What other narrator do you cosplay as? I think that one's easy. Mr. Creepypasta. Mainly because I don't plan on showing my face at all, and I'd be wearing a mask either way. B. Which narrators are you excited to meet? Just everyone. Like I said, I've met so many cool people in this community that it would just be fantastic to actually meet everybody in real life. C. If I hug you upon meeting you, would you be terrified? I do it to everyone. No, I would not be terrified. I would welcome it. And D. Do we quest for pizza or chicken strips? Well, we quest for whichever one is closer. But one of us rolls a 20, we get a rare loot drop, and we get chicken strip covered pizza, so everybody wins. Whew, okay. I can't tell if it's that I either got a lot of questions or I just rambled on like a babbling idiot for an hour. But I hope I answered any questions that anybody may have had, and I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this as much as I rambled on and I babbled like an idiot. Thank you guys for listening. And again, thank you for the 350, now 400 subscribers. It just blows my mind that I've gotten this far with it when I didn't expect to get anywhere close to this. And it means the world to me that you guys are still listening and that you guys actually care. I mean, it means more than you guys realize. So thank you. And I will be back very soon with more creepypastas for you. So stick around. It's gonna be fun.